Hello, my name is Olivia Nanette Whitley, and my final project is about the expected role of women under a patriarchal society. The stories I will be comparing are The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins and The Choking Victim by Alexandra Kleeman. In this presentation, I will be discussing the thematic similarities between The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins and Choking Victim by Alexandra Kleeman. Both stories focus primarily on the isolation surrounding motherhood, as well as the way patriarchy fundamentally reduces women to an extension of others, usually being their husbands and or children. They both also explore the loss of the individual self and the psycho-emotional response when a woman cannot, quote-unquote, fulfill the expectations assigned to her. The Yellow Wallpaper chronicles the diary entries of a new mother as she is quarantined in a vacation home as treatment for her postpartum depression or hysteria. The story follows her psychological unraveling as she is isolated in the house and becomes obsessed with the yellow wallpaper in her bedroom, thinking that there is a woman trapped within it. Choking Victim follows a singular day in the life of a new mother, Karen, acclimating to motherhood. Throughout the story, she strains herself to be the best mother possible, but ultimately struggles to contend with the trials and tribulations of parenthood, which include loneliness, a loss of identity, and the prospect of making mistakes. One predominant theme in both stories is postpartum depression and isolation. In the quote below, the narrator of The Yellow Wallpaper expresses her hindrance to everyday tasks as well as the tasks of motherhood due to her emotional state. Not only does she struggle to fulfill her previous day-to-day role as a wife, she now struggles to connect with her baby. The quote is, "Nobody would believe what an effort it is to do what little I am able, to dress and entertain and order things. It is fortunate Mary is so good with the baby, such a dear baby, and yet I cannot be with him. It makes me so nervous." In the passage from Choking Victim, Karen expresses the loneliness and detachment from society that she faces. Both characters contend with the negative emotional nuances of motherhood. The quote is, "When she was younger, she could be alone for weeks and never realize that it was time to miss another person, time to call another person on the phone. Now she found herself missing anybody she could think of." Another notable theme throughout both stories is the expected role of a woman under the rigid restraints of the patriarchy. While societal norms differ due to the stories being set in extensively different periods of time, both express the sentiment of being limited from their full personhood and autonomy by the behavioral expectations of others. The following passage from The Yellow Wallpaper expresses her family's distaste for her writing, as well as the occupational expectations from the other women in her life. "I must not let her find me writing. She is a perfect and enthusiastic housekeeper and hopes for no better profession. I verily believe she thinks it is the writing which is making me sick." The passage from Choking Victim expresses the loss of individuality that new mothers often face and the tendency for society to reduce women to their roles as mothers, forgetting that they too are valuable, independent entities. It is easy to lose yourself in a kid, even easier if you love it. Your husband comes back, he's tired, you're tired. In the end, all you have time for is a little kiss on the mouth and a conversation about what the baby ate that day. Nobody sees you as yourself anymore, only the walking mouthpiece for that cute bud of flesh. Another significant theme in both stories is the dehumanization of the mother figure. The following quote from The Yellow Wallpaper occurs when the narrator attempts to advocate for her emotional state and her preferences for how it should be treated, and she is immediately shut down. Throughout the story, her husband criticizes her temperament and advises her to think differently and ultimately to be more agreeable. He does not see her as a being capable of autonomy or decision-making and patronizes her attempts at communicating the way she feels. "My darling," said he, "I beg for you, for my sake and for our child's sake, as well as your own, that you will never for one instant let the idea enter your mind. There is nothing so dangerous, so fascinating to a temperament like yours. It is a false and foolish fancy. Can you not trust me as a physician when I tell you?" In the following quote from The Choking Victim, Karen explores the shift in others' treatment towards her when she became a mother, and how the only reason people interact with her is to give her parental advice. Each of these passages reveal the disbelief that society subconsciously feels that mothers are nuanced, capable beings who are able to make decisions and competent on behalf of themselves and their children. When she left the hospital with Lila, it seemed as though she had stepped onto a different planet. People looked at her now only to get out of her way. If someone stopped to speak to her, linger on her, it was always a woman with advice on how to mother, a woman who wanted to know the baby's name or age. She had emerged into a world made only of women, and although they used a friendly tone, they spoke to her as if a new employee whose incompetence was guaranteed. Another theme I identified in the story was the discouragement from liberating hobbies and work. In both stories, the protagonist is a writer and expresses an appreciation for her work. Similarly, in both stories, the mother is discouraged from writing, either overtly or covertly. In Choking Victim, Karen is discouraged from writing by means of being completely occupied with new motherhood and is unable to prefer or fulfill her personal whims. As Karen spoke, she saw that her old classmate was impressed by the things she had accomplished. She felt content. Talking about work had always made her feel more like herself. In The Yellow Wallpaper, on the other hand, the narrator is directly hindered from writing, both by her husband and sister, who think that it contributed to her unwell emotional state. "I did write for a while in spite of them, but it does exhaust me a good deal, having to be so sly about it, or else met with heavy opposition." The final theme that I encountered was the disinvolvement of the husband due to the patriarchal understandings of parental roles. Both characters are left to raise their new child largely on their own without the support of their husband, leaving them isolated and alone. John is away all day, and even some nights when his cases are serious. John does not know how much I really suffer. He knows there is no reason to suffer, and that satisfies him. Because the father is allowed to be disinvolved with the process of raising the child, and subsequently the process of emotionally supporting his wife, the mother is forced to endure the psychological process of failing her role as the maternal figure, all while caring for the baby. For the next 2 weeks, her husband would be in China, supervising the construction of a government library that was being built over the local river. She felt lonelier without him around, but while he was away, she could have her own alone time with her daughter. The climax of suspense reaches a peak in both stories when, due to the stress of fulfilling their designated roles, the characters take action that would imply their inability to make rational judgment. In The Yellow Wallpaper, the narrator becomes overcome with the delusion that there is a woman trapped within her wallpaper and locks herself in the room to rip it off the walls, subsequently freeing the woman. In Choking Victim, the emotional climax occurs when Karen leaves her baby with a stranger at a cafe and returns to find that there has been an accident at the location and her baby is being handled by police. In both of these moments, it highlights the grating emotional fatigue that the characters are experiencing and their inability to perform the role as expected of them. In conclusion, the stories The Choking Victim by Alexandra Kleeman and The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Both convey the claustrophobia that women endure when confronted with the rigidness of patriarchal expectations and gender roles, especially within the dynamics of marriage and parenthood. These gender roles isolate the mother both from herself, her personal aspirations, career, hobbies, and general autonomy, but also with society at large and from her spouse. This expectation that mothers should take on the responsibility of child raising and homekeeping as a sole responsibility creates the understanding that those jobs fully construct a woman's personhood and that she is therefore indivisible from them. This then fundamentally shapes society's attitudes towards women at large, as well as mothers, assuming that the singular trademark of their identity is parenthood. It also creates an expectation that fathers do not have to emotionally support their wives during this period of time. The stories serve as a warning sign for the relentlessly gendered way we approach the family union. When a woman's worth is hindered on her ability to uphold the domestic responsibilities of a household, she is bound to, in some way, fall short of this expectation and see herself as a failure in her fundamental womanhood. These stories are cautionary tales for the psychological impacts that the expectations of motherhood have on the individual. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for listening and have a good day.